She handed me the glass with a smile, so sweet it almost hid the calculation in her eyes. "Just for you, Ethan," she said. It was a Saturday evening that smelled of honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass, the kind of Carolina spring night when everything feels deceptively soft, forgiving. I was standing in the living room of my mother-in-law's sprawling colonial, surrounded by people who all wore the same mask, smiles stretched tight over judgment. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 34 years old, a painter by trade, landscapes, mostly with the occasional commission that helped keep the lights on. Not exactly the kind of resume that one points with Margaret Caldwell, my wife's mother. Margaret didn't believe in dreams. She believed in investments. And in her eyes, I'd been a bad one from the start. I married her daughter, Grace, 5 years ago under a sky full of stars and promises, and ever since, Margaret had been trying to pry us apart with the subtlety of a crowbar. The rest of the family played their parts. Grace's father, Robert, always polite but distant. Her brother, Ryan, openly mocking when the beers flowed too freely. Family dinners were a ritual and a performance. I had learned early on that the best strategy was to smile, eat small portions, and speak only when directly addressed. It wasn't that they hated me outright, it was worse. They pitied me. Such a waste of potential, Margaret would say within earshot, if only he applied himself to something practical. Still, for Grace, I endured it. For Grace, I bit my tongue so often I was surprised I could still taste anything. That night was supposed to be special. Grace had just gotten a huge promotion, Director of Community Outreach at the largest nonprofit in Charleston. Margaret insisted on hosting a celebration dinner. I knew better than to decline. I arrived with a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford, Grace beaming beside me, and a knot in my stomach that tightened with every step toward the front door. The evening unfolded predictably, Robert talking about his golf handicap, Ryan bragging about his latest investment property, Margaret clinking her fork against her glass for a toast where she managed to congratulate Grace while implying she'd risen above certain limitations. I gritted my teeth and raised my glass with the rest of them. Then came the moment. Dessert. Margaret bustling into the kitchen, returning with a tray of drinks she insisted on serving personally. "This one," she said, placing a heavy crystal glass into my hand, "is my own special blend. Only for you, Ethan." The way she said it, syrupy, performative, set off a quiet alarm in my head. I smiled, murmured my thanks, and when her back was turned, I swapped glasses with Robert. No one noticed, not even Grace. 15 minutes later, Robert was pale, sweating, and clutching the edge of the dining table like a man clinging to the side of a cliff. "Maybe the shrimp?" Margaret offered weakly as Robert stumbled toward the bathroom. Grace looked concerned. Ryan laughed nervously. I just watched Margaret. Her eyes flicked from me to the empty glass I'd abandoned, and in that moment I knew it like a storm's about to break by the way the birds fall silent. She had tried to take me out, subtly, elegantly, without leaving fingerprints. But she'd underestimated one thing. I had grown up with people like her, polished on the outside, poisonous underneath. I knew how to survive them. And now I knew it was time to stop surviving and start fighting back. The first sign something was wrong came halfway through dinner. Tasha was unusually quiet. Her smile felt glued on, and she kept fiddling with the silverware, tapping, realigning, then tapping again. Normally, she dominated conversations, steering them, sometimes a little too sharply. Tonight, she hardly spoke at all. I tried to ignore the growing knot in my stomach, chalked it up to stress, maybe holiday nerves. But then just before dessert, I caught a glance between Tasha and her mother, a glance so fleeting, so sharp. It felt like a slap I wasn't supposed to notice. "Derek, why don't you grab the wine from the cellar?" Tasha asked sweetly, almost too sweetly. I hesitated, something in the way she said it, like she needed me out of the room. But I didn't argue. I smiled, nodded, stood up from the table. Their house was big old, with creaky floors and dim hallways that swallowed sound. As I made my way downstairs, I heard the low murmur of voices, urgent, hurried. I slowed my steps, lingering at the edge of the kitchen where the staircase turned. "She's almost got him to sign," Tasha's mother hissed. "We need him to think it's all his idea." Tasha's voice, low and strained. "He's stubborn, Mom, but he trusts me. Give it another week. He'll hand everything over without a fight." I froze. Sign what, hand what over? My mind raced, snapping through conversations, jokes, offhand comments. The new contracts, the expansion project I'd been working on for months, the investment accounts I'd shown Tasha just last week, in confidence, thinking we were building a future together. The blood drained from my face. I turned, walked numbly down to the cellar, grabbed the wine, came back up with a smile, so tight it made my teeth hurt. They didn't know I had heard. Not yet. I poured glasses with a steady hand, answered Tasha's questions, laughed at her father's jokes, played the part of the grateful, clueless son-in-law. Inside, something shattered. Later that night, after we returned home, Tasha curled up beside me on the couch, resting her head against my chest like nothing had changed. I stroked her hair, staring blankly at the TV screen, my mind 1,000 miles away. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice soft, innocent. I kissed the top of her head. "Just tired," I said, but tired wasn't the word. It was something colder, heavier, a quiet resignation, a realization. The woman I loved, the family I thought I was becoming part of, they didn't see me as family at all. I was just a pawn, a bridge to something bigger, a means to an end. And somewhere deep inside, under the shock, under the disbelief, a slow, steady resolve began to take root. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to play the long game, quietly, methodically, just like they had planned for me. Only this time, they wouldn't see the ending coming. Not even close. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet. Tasha still asleep, curled under the covers, her breathing soft and even. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee growing cold between my hands, thinking about every conversation. Every moment she'd brushed off my concerns. Every time she'd smiled a little too quickly, laughed a little too hard. It wasn't just last night. It had been building for months, maybe longer. By the time the sun cracked the horizon, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. People like Tasha and her family, they thrived on confrontation. They knew how to twist stories, turn themselves into the victims. If I wanted the truth, the whole truth, I had to be patient. I had to make sure there were no loopholes, no doubts. And so, quietly, I began to gather evidence. First, I went back through our shared files, contracts, emails, texts. Anything that showed how much I'd built on my own before she ever entered the picture. Then I started backing up copies of everything important: client lists, proposal drafts, financial records. Every document she could possibly use against me if things turned ugly. By the end of the week, I had a complete archive stored on a private server Tasha didn't know existed. Next, I paid a visit to my lawyer, Mr. Bennett. He raised an eyebrow when I walked into his office carrying a thick folder. Thinking of getting divorced already, he joked. I didn't laugh. Just updating my business protections, I said, keeping my voice light. Better safe than sorry, right? He nodded, flipping through the documents without asking too many questions. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. By the second week, Tasha noticed something was off. "You've been distant," she said one night, sliding into my lap like she always used to, fingers tracing lazy circles on my neck. "Work's just been crazy," I murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Another lie, but necessary. She believed it. Of course she did. People like her, they always believe their own lies first. Meanwhile, I started setting quiet traps, little things, like mentioning fake upcoming contracts, talking about phantom opportunities, hinting that I might move some of my investments into joint accounts for our future. Each time, I watched her eyes gleam just a little too brightly, watched her text someone when she thought I wasn't looking, watched her smiles turn razor sharp. She thought I was falling right into their hands. And honestly, for a while, I let her think that too, because sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to play the perfect prey. It all came to a head on a Saturday night, 2 months after the dinner. Tasha suggested we host a party, just a few close friends. She said, her voice syrupy sweet. I agreed immediately too easily. She should have been suspicious. But she wasn't. She thought she'd already won. That night, our house filled with laughter, clinking glasses, low murmurs over candlelight. Tasha was radiant in that practiced way of hers, floating from guest to guest, the perfect hostess. Meanwhile, I moved quietly unnoticed, setting things in motion. At exactly 8:15 p.m., I excused myself, slipping upstairs under the pretense of grabbing more wine from the cellar. Instead, I activated the private camera system I'd installed weeks earlier. Tiny lenses tucked into vents, picture frames, invisible but all-seeing. Downstairs, the plan unfolded exactly as I suspected. Tasha disappeared into the study with her brother Kyle and 2 of their friends. A cozy little meeting behind closed doors. I watched from my phone upstairs, zoomed in on the documents they pulled out, recognized the company logos, my company. They were drafting a transfer of ownership agreement, complete with forged signatures, mine included. My blood turned cold. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was full-scale theft. They laughed, joked about how easy it would be. By the time he realizes it'll be too late, Kyle smirked. Tasha didn't even correct him. She just smiled that thin, victorious smile. I ended the recording, saved it, backed it up 3 different ways. Then, I walked back downstairs, carrying a fresh bottle of wine like nothing was wrong. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Tasha kissed my cheek as we waved goodbye to guests. You're amazing, she whispered. I smiled back for the last time. 2 days later, I filed the first set of lawsuits. Forgery, fraud, attempted misappropriation of assets. I didn't confront Tasha at home. I let the sheriff's deputy do it, handing her the thick packet of papers in our living room while she stood there, stunned, still in her workout clothes. The look on her face? Priceless. What is this? She stammered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I know everything. I said simply, quietly. Her mouth open, closed, open again. Liam, wait. But I didn't wait. I turned and walked out the door for the last time. Outside, the spring air was sharp against my skin, but it smelled like freedom. That night, while Tasha tried to call, to text, to beg, I sat in a tiny downtown apartment sipping coffee out of a paper cup, watching the city lights blur through the rain. And for the first time in years, I felt utterly, completely at peace. Three months later, the divorce was finalized, quietly, efficiently, devastatingly for her. The judge reviewed the evidence, the security footage, the forged documents. Tasha tried to paint herself as confused, manipulated by her brother, but the truth was laid bare, frame by frame, line by line. She lost everything she had schemed for. The business interests, the investments, even the house her parents had gifted us for our wedding, all awarded back to me, not out of revenge, but because facts don't bend to pretty lies. Tasha left the courthouse without a word, head down, shoulders hunched, no audience left to applaud her. I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. What I felt was release, like I'd finally dropped a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying all these years. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small lake cabin just outside Asheville. Nothing fancy, just space to breathe, to rebuild. I spent my mornings hiking rugged trails, afternoons editing old photo collections I never had time to touch, evenings sitting by the fire, a book in one hand, and a camera always within reach. Some nights, I'd walk out to the edge of the dock, barefoot, feeling the wood still warm from the sun under my feet, and watch the sky turn molten gold over the water. It was in those moments, with the world utterly silent except for the soft lapping of the waves, that the lessons finally sank in. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't even about justice. It was about reclaiming my own story, choosing peace over pride, building a life where I didn't have to constantly prove my worth to people too blind to see it. One evening, just as the sun dipped low, painting everything in shades of fire and honey, I snapped a photo. No grand composition, no technical tricks, just light, water, and the echo of quiet resilience. I printed it the next day, framed it simply, and hung it above the cabin fireplace. I titled it Freedom Caught in a Breath. When friends came to visit, they'd sometimes ask about it, what it meant. I'd just smile and say, it's a reminder that the best revenge is living exactly the life they tried to take away from you. And every time I said it, I meant it more.